Iraq, 2003, and you got to remember I'm a Delta pilot, Air National Guard pilot, and I've got a family, 3 kids, and here I am all of a sudden thrown into activated, and now we're over in the Middle East flying combat missions over Iraq. We were Scud hunters over the western section of Iraq, and flying F-16Cs, Block 30 plus models. You don't hear the plus model very much, but that was the most up-to-date F-16 Block 30 there was. We had Lightning II pod, targeting pods that we used to look for scuds on the ground. A lot of our missions were very boring, and some of them were very exciting. Sometimes you brought all your bombs home, sometimes you came back with no bombs because you dropped them. Sometimes you were getting shot at, sometimes you're just searching out, you're flying over Iraq in the middle of the night with nothing happening. But my story that I have to tell you has to do with one night over Iraq. My wingman, his name is Captain, at the time, Captain Brian Wolf. He's a big EAA fan. He had a T6 and a Stearman and flew F-16s, had everything going for him. He passed away last year in a car crash in a Corvette. We went out to fly a routine scud hunting mission over Iraq one night. We wore MVGs. Our loadout was usually the standard thing. We had 2 laser-guided bombs on the right side of the jet. On the left side, we had one 2,000-pound JDAM. And then we were loaded out with a couple of air-to-air missiles. A fairly heavyweight airplane with internal and external tanks. We normally take off and fly to a refueling point, hit the KC-135 or KC-10, top off our tanks, and then we proceed into certain areas that we were designated to go to and look for scuds. That night, the weather was probably the worst I'd ever seen it over the time we were there, because we get these sandstorms that would blow in, and the visibility would be just dog crap below the weather, and then about 22,000 feet or whatever, somewhere in there, ragged, it'd clear up and just be solid, clear skies, you could see the stars, everything was beautiful. But down below, it was just this hazy, nasty milk bowl, and just difficult to fly in with night vision goggles. When we stepped to fly that night, we're just going, man, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to be drilling holes in the sky. So you're just kind of, you're not totally relaxed, but you're like, this is going to be totally boredom. Why are we even going? We took off, went and hit the tanker, and we just come off the tanker. And we got a call to head to some coordinates up in northwest Iraq, that there was a overrun situation going on. They gave us a code word for that. So we typed in the coordinates, started heading that way, and they gave us a couple radio calls. I made radio calls over that, and no one came back to us. Our call sign was Honcho 23, and he was 24. And we had a system called SADL, which is Situational Air Data Link. I think it's what it stands for, but I have the ability to see where he is and he sees where I'm at. And he can lock onto me and we can data link between each other. I can see what his fuel state is, what his weapon state is, and he can do the same for me. That's a really cool system, especially when you got a lot of airplanes. So we were way up out of the area that we didn't even have maps for. We were up in the north, starting to be cutting the corner around where Syria is. We're pretty close to the border of Syria. And over our guard frequency, which is the 2430 freak that's normally used for emergencies, we got the call from these special operations guys who have British voices. They were special boat service guys. They had been surrounded by the enemy, and they were just calling on the radio with hysterical voices. The guy's just screaming on the radio. He's calling it fast air, which is a term they use over there in the UK. We don't, but I knew what they meant. He's just saying, fast air, fast air, fast air. We need your help. We're completely surrounded. 300 meters, take everything out, kind of stuff like that. But I mean, he's like the cry of death. You know, something is about to, he's about to lose his life, is what it sounds like to me. I like to use the analogy of going, okay, there's an interstate highway and someone's walking down the highway. I'll say, hey, get up, get away from the road to the little child. But if they're right in the middle of the road, you have to go out, maybe run out in the middle of the highway and get the child off the road and then try to save their life. In this situation, I'm going, we got to go down and help these guys. Their hysterical voices kind of was a calling to go above and beyond what you normally would do. We were above the weather in the low 20s, so we're in the clear, so we can see each other. There's no problem. Life is good down there in this hazy milk bowl cloud mess. We're not going to see anything in a tarting pod. We're not going to see anything in our MDG, so we got to go below the ROE floor, which at that time was about 10,000 feet. So we had to, at the time, we couldn't go below that altitude unless the situation was going on like this. And it had to be that, otherwise you would get grounded basically from our commander for going below 10,000 feet. So we started heading down below 10,000 feet. I put my wingman back in what we call a fighting wing kind of wedge position. He can't see me that well, but he's using the data link to be able to keep track of me and not have to use his radar, because if he locks me up with his radar now, he's trashing my radar warning receiver. And it looks like someone's locked onto me, and I couldn't tell if anybody on the ground was or not. So we went down and tried our best to help these guys. The biggest problem that night for me was spatial disorientation, because you're trying to fly VFR and IFR conditions. And we broke out about 12,000 feet, then you'd be back in it, and we're down about 7,000 to 8,000 feet and in and out of the clouds. But below the clouds, you can see the ground, but it's just completely just a green mess because of all the sandstorm and all the haze. And there's no, with NVGs, you got to have illumination. You got to have either lights or you got to have the moon. The moon almost looks like the sun with NVGs because it lights up the ground. It was just one big mess. And so my wingman was having the same problem. He's got to keep track of me and try to listen for the radio calls where the guy's trying to talk us onto his position, which is nothing on the ground for him to do. So we just got his coordinates. So we're circling around his position, and you're looking out with your NVGs, and then you're having to look back in at your head-up display, and then you get reflections in the cockpit, so your eyes are constantly having to adjust. So I turned all my lights off. I turned down my multifunction displays, and I just had the one light dimly lit on my attitude indicator, because I knew that was my one and only source of attitude information. I have it in the heads-up display as well, but most round dial guys learn how to fly and they want to go right to an attitude indicator. So I'm constantly trying to circle around, getting frustrated. The guy is still calling hysterically for help for us. So I just, you got to pull things out of your bag of tricks. So what we did is we started flying a racetrack pattern from about 10 miles away. I go out 10 miles out, turn back in, and point at the coordinates and start diving down toward the ground and and what they were going to do was use an IR strobe. An IR strobe is it's like, it could be like a small flashlight that puts on an IR light, and he can wave it in the air and it'll look like a rope going through the air with your NVGs. So he was doing that. I'm diving down toward where I think he is, and I'm just going to try to find his strobe and then just take a wild guess. That's about 300 meters. He was saying the enemy was 300 meters away and he was surrounded. And so I was just going to pickle off a bomb. One dumb bomb, basically take a laser guided bomb and just drop it. It's going to go off without guidance. Every time I dive down, I had everything turned off, so I don't know what my altitude is. So I'm relying on Wolfman behind me, because I couldn't remember the min altitude for a Mark 82, which is the 500-pound bomb. And because we didn't plan on doing that kind of stuff that night. We went out the door to do laser guided bombs, and you go out bombing for quarters, you're like, probably maybe 2,500 feet above the ground, but I don't even know what the elevation is there. It's off the charts, and there's no time to pull maps out and start looking at stuff. You're just going. You know, it's just like a kid drowning in the pool. You're going to jump in. You're not going to evaluate how deep the water is, how cold it is, or whatever. Same situation. Like, I can't evaluate exactly what all the things are. There's no time to do that. I'm just going to go down and take the risk. I mean, you know, you're drawn into the fight by the radio. So we head down, and on one of the last passes that I made that night, I'm coming off, and Wolfman's back here about 1.5 miles. I'm coming off, and he's been chasing me down. And he says, I got him. And I said, you got the tack lead. And I checked down off his right wing, and he confirms and rolls in and drops a bomb out in the middle of nowhere, near where these guys were. And we put out flares as well during this attack. Well, the folks back at the base looked at his tapes like he was a criminal almost. Because they're like, hey, what are you looking at here? What are you aiming at? They didn't understand the situation. Obviously, they weren't there. Nothing ever happened to him because of that. But the fact is that those bombs, or that bomb he dropped, it made a difference, as well as the noise. And I learned that later, that noise for these Army guys is almost as good as a weapon going off, because it makes the enemy hunker down. We also put out flares, which highlighted us. I got back and told my roommate that we'd put out flares, and he was like, you gotta be kidding me. You're crazy? You know, you're highlighting your position. I'm like, we're trying to help this, you know, these guys on the ground. Well, we found out, we basically got to a gas state that we had to leave, and there was some AC-130s coming in. So those guys ended up replacing us. At the time, I had no idea that these guys would survive the whole way home, and it's a long way home, by the way. It's, you know, even though you're doing, you know, 0.8 Mach and an F-16 at, 25,000 feet, you're just beaming straight for home, and it takes a while. It's pretty deep in there. And I know you're in a single-seat, single-engine jet, you know, flying NVGs at night, and it's just you and your wingman out there in the middle of freaking nowhere, Iraq. There's nobody else to help us. We're the only guys, by the way, the only F-16s. There's some other F-16s overhead earlier and later that no one went down below that weather. We're the only guys that went down below. I could never understand that, but we took the risk. Maybe some guys wouldn't do that, I don't know. Or maybe they didn't know the urgency of the situation like we thought it was. Anyway, we get back to the base. We're pretty frustrated. Probably one of the most frustrating nights. Probably one of the most difficult missions I've ever flown, the F-16, with over 2,200 hours in it. And the worst weather, you don't train doing that kind of stuff. And most guys would not even think about flying in that kind of stuff. We found out the next day that they had, like, over 50 guys had been rescued. They were British guys, and they'd sent a Chinook helicopter in there and picked them up. I later was stationed down at Hurlburt, so I had the opportunity to talk to some of the special ops guys. And one day I got a call that they said that 2 of these guys were in town, and I could have the opportunity to meet them. So I went and got to debrief with them and found out how effective we were. And at one time they thought we were A-10 guys. They said that they didn't think any F-16 guys would even come down like that. And we were the only 2 guys. Yeah, I gave him my call sign. He confirmed the call sign. Yeah, we were the only guys and who went down and helped them. And they said it did. It opened up. He said it causes, he says, the noise and the flares are the most effective of anything that we did. And it caused the enemy to hunker down, and they were able to get on the run and get picked up. So that was pretty cool. They gave me a little plaque from the Special Boat Service, and took some photos. I was very blessed. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross with the Valor device. There's Distinguished Flying Crosses given out for 2 different reasons: for just some important mission that someone went on. I think the guys that dropped on Saddam's palaces, or some pretty high vis missions. Guys have gotten DFCs for that. Mine was for heroism. I thought my wingman should have gotten one too. I fought that for a long time. I recommended him. I even tried to get the Brits to recommend it for one, and they did, but things got turned down. But that was the craziest night of my life, and it changed my life in a lot of ways, because I believe God was there protecting us. And I went on a mission trip last year to Haiti, and I just feel like I'm just lucky to be alive. So I try to help others now more than I used to. It's just it's one of those things. But I'm back in the Air Force flying F-16s, and but I have a different perspective on life. And now that my buddy, my wingman's not with us anymore, killed in a car wreck, I'm glad our story was at least published. I wish he had the opportunity to sit next to me and talk about it as well, because you always pick up different pieces of the story with two different voices. But I give God the credit for being there protecting us, and I give my wingman a lot of credit for just hanging on in that crappy weather and being the best wingman I could ever ask for. If I had to go in combat ever again, that's who I want on my wing. He's not around anymore. But super dude. Just the best guy on the ground and the best guy in the air to be friends